Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? At 18, I made a more difficult decision, and I told my mother I would never talk to her again. And that held true because I looked at my life. I looked at the potential future I could have. And I will tell you right now, I can't, there's no time machine. I don't know. I don't have a measurement for it, but I feel very strongly had I not made that decision to cut off the relationship with my narcissistic mother, I would not be here talking to you today. And then in my early 20s, I had to make the same decision with my grandmother, which was incredibly difficult because, in part, she is the person that raised me. And I'm not saying there wasn't love involved in this because obviously there was. But I had to think about what was happening in my life. Being a biracial kid, being raised by a racist white woman who, even into my late teens and 20s, would not allow me to step into any capacity of my ethnicity became this huge precursor for me having an identity crisis. And I knew that every single time I wanted to move towards being the person that I wanted to be, she would guilt me. I didn't raise you to be this way. And we're talking about simple things. I remember I was listening to like Will Smith, and of all the rappers on planet Earth, Will Smith is probably like the least intimidating, right? Probably the one that you want your kid to listen to. And she's like, I didn't raise you to listen to this music, right? Being hip hop, being cultured music, being people of color music, like anything. Like even one time I was listening to this like mixtape in Spanish, and she's like, "You don't do that in this house." And and every time that I tried to move towards that, there was some kind of shame or guilt, from the clothes that I wore to the hats that I wore to the way that I spoke to the things that I was reading or watching. There was always this thing about I'm not showing up to their expectations of who I should be. Now, when I made these decisions to eliminate, I don't want to say eliminate, that's the wrong word. I'm not like, it's not taken. I didn't fucking murder them. Um, when I made the decision to remove them from my life, it was predicated on the understanding that I had to take control back. One of the things that we have to understand about people who gaslight us, who guilt trip us, who shame us, is that they are trying to have control over us. And if we want freedom, if we want independence, we have to remove ourselves from that. And sometimes, unfortunately, and probably the harder part of this conversation is that you have to cut off all ties. Now, that's the worst case scenario. I think the precursor to that is, can you have the conversation? Can you sit down and say, hey, I don't like what is happening here. I'm no longer going to allow you to control or dictate any part of my life, who I date, who I hang out with, the clothes I wear, the music I listen to, the food I eat, ad nauseum, all of it, up top to bottom, just getting super clear and concise and saying, you don't get a say in any of this. And I'll tell you this, as you do this, and this was my experience where I felt it the heaviest, was just this inundation of guilt and shame because I'm your mother, I'm your grandmother, these are your parents, this is your family, so on and so forth. And it came down, it was like this rain upon me. And in that, I understood something. And this is what I want you to understand. When people try to control you and you take your control back, the number one thing that they want to do is to belittle you and make you feel small so that you believe that the only way you are going to be capable of succeeding in life is by giving your control back to them. And so, in this, what I want you to think about as you're dealing with relationships, and it does not necessarily have to be a parent, this applies to anyone in your life who is trying to control you, who's taking away your capacity to be the hero of your own story. Anyone who is not in support of you is going to combat you, is going to fight you, is going to shame you, bring you down, say the nastiest shit to you to make you feel small and belittled so that they keep the power. And the only way that you're going to move through this is to stand up for yourself, say no, and do what you have to do to make sure that you step into freedom in your life. And look, my friends, I'll tell you this, it's not easy, but it is necessary because your parents, your relationship, your partner, your job, your business, your career, everything around you, if there are people in your life who are pulling you down, ask yourself this question. Ask yourself this question. If every single day you had to walk into a room, and when you walked into that room, you got punched in the face, how many times would you walk into that room before you stopped? And I know this is a hard question. I know that analogy may hit home for some people, it may not for others. But at some point, you have to understand every single time that you allow them to take from you, you are giving them your power. And until you put your boundaries in place and hold true to those boundaries, they are going to be in control. And I believe that you have the ability to take your life back.